Okay, I'll
So
go ahead.
Thank you. I'm gonna mute.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Garden Hour. We are glad you are able to join us today. I am Jennifer Schutter. I am the horticulture field specialist in the Adair County Extension Office in Kirksville, and I am joined with my colleagues from around the state. And if you look at this map, you will see where each of us horticulture specialists is located. You can find your county on this map and see which horticulture specialist covers your county and reach out to them if you have questions. You are also welcome to contact any of us with your questions. We like to help each other out, so feel free to contact any of us. If you would like to go back and watch today's Garden Hour, you can do that by going to our YouTube channel. If you have to step away or you miss parts of it, that's another way you can go back and watch it. And we also make snippets of different topics in the Garden Hour, and you can also watch those. And with that, I will turn it over to Zack for a weather report.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. And as I'm getting my slides here, welcome everyone to the first day of May here. And our big theme is that the month of April ended with a bang and that we got quite a bit of rainfall across the state of the Missouri here. And so here I'm showing on the left a map of our radar estimated rainfall really from last week through Monday of this week. So picking up that rainfall event that was primarily from Thursday to Sunday. And these are some of the multi-day totals where we saw rainfall accumulations across the state. And so where you see anywhere in yellow here, that's greater than 2 inches of rainfall. The kind of goldenrod color is greater than 3 inches of rainfall, which was very widespread. And then where we see that red and areas of red, especially in west central Missouri, we saw over 5 inches of rainfall and generally 5 to 8 inches in a lot of those locations. And so if we look here on the right, we can see our top 10 multi-day rainfall totals across the state. And we see a lot of those 7 and 8 inch totals there in mainly west central Missouri. Bates County, I would say, maybe was our big winner from rainfall last week. 3 Kokoraz gauges recording pretty much over 7.5 inches in different locations throughout that county. And so really impressive totals. Although I will note there's a few spots that you might see some lighter greens here in southeast Missouri, especially in the Boot Heel, and a few spots in northwest Missouri that didn't get quite as much rain as some of the other locations here. But in addition to all of this rain that we saw, it was also a pretty stormy period over the weekend. So here looking at storm reports from the weekend. And so starting on the left on Friday, what we can see here is anywhere you see a red dot's a tornado report, green shows hail, and blue shows those damaging wind reports. And we did have some confirmed tornadoes over the weekend. Fortunately, they were EF0 or EF1 tornadoes, so they weren't very strong or long-lasting, but did cause damage across the state. And so we saw that on Friday. More storms on Saturday here in the middle with a couple of additional tornado reports, some wind and hail as well. And then things kind of wound down on Sunday. But fortunately, I think we did kind of miss the worst of the severe weather across the kind of Midwest and central United States. Friday's tornadoes, the worst of them stayed off in Nebraska and Iowa, and the worst on Saturday stayed down in Oklahoma and into our west in Kansas. So while we did have some severe weather, I think we escaped some of the worst regionally throughout the week. Additionally, with all the rain that we saw come in, we have had a lot of flood watches, warnings, and advisories over the past week. It's likely your location, you've been under one of these at some point. And even as of this morning, we still have a lot of these flood warnings, river flood warnings around the state right now. A lot of these right now are for some of our bigger rivers, like the Mississippi River here, the Missouri River, the Grand River, and the Osage River. Where there were a lot of flood warnings with some of our smaller streams and creeks, those have now crested, and we're waiting for the water to recede on some of those bigger rivers. And that's why these flood warnings are still in effect, and we're also expecting some more rainfall in the future as well. But just when we thought we were done with the rainfall, we actually had a pretty nice day yesterday across the state, but did see some storms pop up in the afternoon and evening in the western part of the state and going into last evening. And so these are actually our rainfall totals over the past 24 hours. You can see they've been pretty localized. You can really kind of see the individual storms here. Most locations that did get some rainfall were under a ½ inch, which is shown in green here. But I do want to highlight up here in northwest Missouri, where we see on this radar rainfall that a storm moved through Atchison and Holt and Nottoway counties up here. We also received quite a few hail reports from this storm yesterday. Saw some reports of golf ball to even baseball size hail in a small area in some of those counties. So did have one additional day of severe weather yesterday, but again, most of that stayed to our west and north, fortunately. And so now that we can put April in the books, it's going to go down as a wetter than average month. As we went through the month, it didn't look that way. And even last week, a lot of the state was still behind on rainfall. But with so much coming over the past week, it's really bumped those totals well above the average. And so if we look at Kansas City, St. Louis, and Springfield, for example, all more than 2 inches above average for April. And as you can see on this map here, anywhere you're seeing these kind of darker greens, we have locations that are 2 to 4 inches, even higher above average as well. So definitely going to be a wetter than average month, and temperatures will end 2 to 3 degrees above normal, so slightly above average with our temperatures there. But again, there are some parts of the state that are a little bit behind on rainfall and have not benefited from all of this rain we've seen here during April, and that would be extreme southern Missouri along the Arkansas border and some of southeast Missouri as well. Now, if you're wondering what's on the way now that we can put this big system behind us with all that rainfall, a lot of similar rainfall is actually on the way over the next week. And so really we'll start to look to our west today. And so this map shows our current surface map for the United States. And if you look at Missouri, there's a front draped right across the state. And where you see the kind of red barbs right next to the blue, that means it's a stationary front and it's not moving much. And so this is kind of a boundary to warmer air to our south, where we've got highs in the mid 80s here, even down to 87 in the Boot Heel. Cooler, less humid air to the north, highs in the lower 70s across northern Missouri, split by this boundary. But we will start to see, especially later this afternoon, some additional shower activity and some storms pop up along this boundary and start bringing additional rainfall here to western Missouri. And as we continue over the next few days, we'll start here on Wednesday and really kind of keep an eye on the system coming out of the Rockies, because we expect it to increase and really strengthen and bring a lot more rainfall to the region, and then slowly move east on Thursday and then exit the area on Friday. And so when we look at how much rainfall we're expecting here, we can look at our precipitation forecast for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Today's precip is mostly to western Missouri. And in fact, really on this forecast, really looking at northwest Missouri, some of those same spots that got some storms yesterday, maybe a ½ inch or so of rainfall today, spotty totals outside of those areas. Tomorrow looks like our big widespread statewide rain event. So we see here the entire state's forecasted to receive over a ¼ inch of rainfall, and areas in those blue, we're looking more towards a ½ inch to 1.5 inches. So some significant totals possible tomorrow, and some lighter totals as the system moves out on Friday. And so with this kind of widespread rainfall we're expecting tomorrow, soils are super saturated right now. A lot of those streams and creeks are still pretty high. So there is a slight risk for flash flooding here on Thursday. Here we see the area of yellow showing that slight risk covers most of Missouri. And that's not surprising with those forecast totals and how wet we've been over the past week. So we'll definitely have to watch for flooding in spots that pick up localized higher rainfall totals. The good news is that while we do have a slight risk for severe storms, or excuse me, a marginal risk for severe storms today and tomorrow, it's very low compared to last week's risk for severe storms. And so here we look on the left for Wednesday. We see this dark green from the Storm Prediction Center's convective outlook. This is the lowest level of severe threat here, so this marginal risk. And so not a very large risk, but there could be a few storms that are severe. And same tomorrow, but again, most of this activity is going to stay to our west today, out into the Great Plains, and not many of those storms expected to make it into Missouri. So more of a rain event and a bit less of a severe weather event compared to last week. Now, as we get into the weekend and keep looking forward, I won't get into the specifics here, but did just want to show that we're going to have several more disturbances moving across the state and continuing those rain chances into next week. And so if we look at our precip forecast, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, we're forecasting rain for pretty much the whole state each day. I will say the totals here are generally light, less than a quarter inch for most spots per day. So these days don't look like washouts, but definitely a probability of rainfall occurring each day, getting into next week as well. Temperatures during this time, not much to report. They're actually going to be pretty close to our seasonal average for this time of year. So look for highs in the 70s in the weekend, lows around 50 to 60 degrees, and we'll start to gradually warm up next week on Monday and Tuesday as well. And so we add up all this rainfall and look at here how it'll look over the next 7 days in our forecast. And we can see this purple area in the northwest 2/3 of Missouri. That's about 1.5 to 3 inches of rainfall in the forecast. So another significant multi-day rainfall event expected. I will note, though, those areas that have continued to be a little bit drier, forecast is still calling for a good amount of rain, but lesser totals in southeastern Missouri. So we'll have to keep an eye on the forecast there. Looking ahead, much of the same kind of expected here. So in our 8 to 14 day outlooks, looking at a slightly above normal chance for higher than average temperatures, kind of continuing this trend of slightly above average temperatures, and not a confident forecast, but showing a really slight chance for above normal precipitation next week that could maybe continue this wet pattern we're currently having now. I'll end here. The Climate Prediction Center did update their May outlook yesterday with some of the data from the end of April here. And there's not a lot of changes, but if we look at the temperatures, still expecting above average temperatures during the month of May, but they did slightly increase the confidence in above average precipitation for Missouri during May, as we're showing here. And really, I think this kind of above normal area in southwest Missouri, a lot of that confidence comes from precipitation expected in the next 2 weeks at the first half of the month that could help to put us above average for the entire month. So good news for continued drought recovery across the state, but it certainly has been a wet period and tricky to get outside at some times. So hopefully you all are able to find some time to enjoy the weather with all the rain in the forecast this next week. So that's all I've got for today, and I'm happy to take any questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Zach. I know that rain has been welcomed in many parts of Missouri where it has been dry and ponds have been low in some of the counties in the southern part of the state. I am hoping, though, that it holds off for tomorrow morning. I've got a Master Gardener class, and we're going to go have a garden visit as part of the herbaceous ornamental class. And this is a reschedule actually from 2 weeks ago because of rain. We got washed out. So hoping it'll hold off in the Kirksville area tomorrow morning. So we'll see, though, huh?
Yes,
So, thank
fingers
you.
crossed.
All right, so we will move on to, actually, I would like to mention that if you have a question, you can ask it in the chat. Donna has changed her name to Ask Questions Here, so feel free to ask a question. And Debbie is dropping links into the chat. And with that, we will move on to our next topic, which is native bees in the garden. And Tamra is going to talk about that.
Hi, everyone. Let me pull up my slides. There we go. Hopefully you can see that now.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. All right. So yeah, we're going to talk about native bees in the garden. It's a fascinating topic. I love my native bees. I love honeybees too. But we wanted to share this because you probably are seeing native bees as our flowers start blooming and as they start awakening. Just first, I want to point out that most of the flowers in the world require an animal pollinator. So that can be many different kinds, but this is very important for the food that we eat and also for our wildlife to be able to have food. Specifically looking at bees, 75% of the fruits, nuts, and vegetables grown in the United States require bee pollinators. And 1 in 4 bites of food that we take is courtesy of a bee, and it's a huge part of our crop value. So also I have to point out what specifically is pollination. It's not just the transfer of pollen from flower to flower. It has to be flowers of the same species. That becomes really important when we're talking about why native bees are important. Here's some different pollinators that we have, beetles and butterflies and flies, and then we have our bees. So I'm going kind of fast because we have a lot of information and there's so much that we're going to cover today. But I do want to point out a few specifics, few specific types of bees, but then also what is not a bee. So this is a bee. You can see it's nice and fuzzy, and it's actually herbaceous, so it's going to be feeding on nectar and pollen. This is a wasp. Most wasps are not nearly as fuzzy. They can also drink nectar, but they are mostly going to be carnivores, or they prey on other insects. So then when we look more deeply into bees, we have honeybees, which are actually not a native species, and then we have our native bee species. So there's about 4,000 species here in the United States, about 20,000 worldwide. Here in the Missouri area, we have between 400 and 500 species. Now, most of these are going to be solitary in comparison to our honeybees, which actually are eusocial and live in a hive and work together. But most of our native bees are solitary, meaning that when an egg is laid, then they never really see another or interact with another bee of their species until it's time to reproduce. Most of them are going to live in the ground, though some of them will also live in cavities. That will be like the stems of plants. They can actually be better pollinators. We need more research on them. They're harder to study than honeybees. And often they can be, as I mentioned, better pollinators, and that's because they can visit flowers over greater distances, which means that they're transporting pollen over greater distances, which means that there's a better chance for genetic diversity. There are a lot of plants that require, as I mentioned before, native or require pollinators, and these are just some examples of some of the plants that are going to require that. So there are a lot of different kinds of bees. We can kind of divide them up into several different groups. This is one way to divide them up into groups: bumblebees, carpenter bees, leafcutter and mason bees, digger bees, cuckoo bees, longhorn bees, sweat bees, squash bees, mask bees, and polyester bees. We don't have time to cover all of those today, but we will go into depth, a little bit of depth into some of these. So bumblebees, these, you should probably start seeing the queen bumblebees out, if not now, but very soon. And these are going to be quite a bit larger than what you would typically see for bumblebees. There's a huge diversity of bees, and you can see that in this chart right here. Some are big, some are small, but the really big ones that are coming out here in the spring are the queen bees that are going to be starting the colony. So if you see those, let them be. And hopefully they'll be able to find a place nearby where they can start their colony and be successful throughout the season. Carpenter bees look very much like our bumblebees, but they have some distinct differences. You can tell the difference between a carpenter bee and a bumblebee by looking at their abdomen, and you can see that they are quite shiny. Now, carpenter bees can be a pest in human structures because when they build a nest, they're actually carving out a hole in your wooden structures. So that could be your deck, it could be your house, it could be a shed. So that can cause a problem, but you can also see that they're also pollinators, so they also are beneficial. So a good way to deal with them is make sure that all of your wood structures are painted and that perhaps they have some old wood that they can actually build their nest farther away from the house. I tend to find leafcutter bees more by finding what they do to my plants rather than even seeing them. And if you see these circular shapes cut into your leaves, these are going to be your leafcutter bees. Now, this is what they can look like. A little bit hard to see, but I liked this image because you can see they are cutting out these almost perfect semicircles out of your leaves, and then they take that to provision their nest. Then we have digger and miner bees. So most of these are really quite small, though there is a range 6 to 15 millimeters. These are solitary ground nesters as well. I know that this one right here, I have a whole nest of these right outside my house in the backyard, which I will leave because I want to see them. They're ephemeral. I only see them in the spring, and then they're gone the rest of the year. This is a longhorned bee. There's quite a few in this group, these longhorn bees. This one looks also very much like a bumblebee. She's as big as a bumblebee, but not considered a bumblebee. But if you have these cone flowers, you might be able to find them in your yard too. Sweat bees. Contrary to their name, they are not all attracted to sweat, and really if they're landing on you, it's because they need that mineral, the minerals that can come from the sweat. Very docile bees, and there's a huge range of them. So this is probably what most people think of when they think of a sweat bee, is this little green bee, but there's more than just green bees in this group. And then of course we have squash bees. So these are a little bit larger than some of the other bees, the smaller ones that I was showing you earlier, but they're rather charismatic, and you can see that, well, they are a specialist on squash, and they're really just a fun bee to have in the garden. So there's a lot of benefits for creating space in your garden for native bees. So enhanced crop yields, helping with preserving biodiversity in our yards. It's best for our ecosystems to be able to have this biodiversity in case something were to happen to any individual species. Then we'll have other species that can help fill in the gaps. Our native bees are really important for agriculture generally, for those biodiversity reasons, but also because of their power in being great pollinators. Also, it's important to note that when we improve habitat for our native bees, it's good for our honeybees, and the same for if we improve habitat for our honeybees, it's good for our native bees. It's also good for our frogs and toads and beneficial insects and birds, the environments, and also for us when we improve our environment for all of these animals. So just really quickly, what are some things that we can do to help, because populations are in decline for our native bees? First, you can learn more. Also, please plant more flowers. We're gardeners. We like to have flowers. This is your excuse to plant more. And when you're looking to plant more flowers, please consider native plants. Also, create more nesting sites. So that means in all the places that you have in your yard that you have mulch, maybe leave some areas that don't have mulch, because most of them are ground nesters. Also, keeping it dark at night is really important for all of our beneficial insects, but it actually can help our bees. Make sure that you use IPM principles, integrated pest management, and then share the word with others. And then very quickly, I just want to point this out, that if you do have to spray pesticides, there's some really critical things that you can do that will help our bees, and that's don't spray when blooms are present. That's because that's blooms bring in the bees, and so just please avoid doing that. And there's lots of different ways that you can avoid doing that. An article is in a link to an article is in the chat, so you can read more if you want more information. So I hope that you will garden for the bees this year.
We have one question that came in. Are all bees plant specific when pollinating?
No, so there are quite a few specialist bees, but most of our bees are actually, well, it's generalists. Many of them are generalists. I don't know the exact percentage, but there's a very large percentage that are specialists, but I believe that most of them actually are generalist. And generalist is kind of a range as well as specialist. So even if we say generalist, that doesn't mean that they go to all plants equally, but it means that they're more than just a smaller genre. So I hope that answers the question.
I think it
All
did.
right. Thank you, Tamra. Well, it is the time to plant vegetables around the state, and you can either direct seeds and vegetables or you can use transplants. And Gwen is now going to talk about transplanting vegetables.
Yes, let me get my screen up here. All right, is that showing correctly? Looks like it is not.
It is showing.
There. Does that work?
Yeah, yes, that's good.
Okay. All right, thank you. So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about transplanting because I think a lot of people are thinking about getting them into your garden, and there are good things about using transplants. It kind of gives you an opportunity to grow things where if you have a shorter growing season, you can kind of get a head start, and it allows for more uniform planting. And it also allows you to select certain varieties. So using transplants in the garden can be beneficial. So I wanted to talk about the 3 P's of using transplants. The first one is planning. First, you want to research the varieties that do well in your area. And if you go to the MU vegetable planting calendar, they have some tables in there that will talk about different varieties that have been tested and shown to do well in our climate. So for example, you can see the picture here with cucumber, and you can see the sweet slice type. So if you kind of get an idea maybe of different varieties, when you go to the bedding stores or your garden centers, you can start looking for some of those varieties so that you can hopefully, get good success with your plants. You also want to get the timing right. And I have the picture of Missouri here showing you the different zones. And you can see, like, I'm up here in Northwest Missouri in the north part of the state. So, my time for planting is going to be a little bit later than anybody else. So I really shouldn't start thinking about planting transplants until about May 10th or so. Otherwise, I may run into the risk of frost or damage. I know a couple of years ago, it may have been even last year, that we had a very late hard frost at the end of May, and that pretty much wiped out all my garden. I had just a few green beans left at that point. So you want to get the timing right, and maybe get your plants maybe a week or so before you want to get them out in the garden. That kind of gives you a little bit of time to get them acclimated to your climate. So when you bring them home, you might want to put them in the shade, kind of protect them from the wind just a little bit, and then gradually move them into more sun, less water, more wind, so that they can kind of get acclimated before you actually start planting them. And again, just kind of look at that vegetable planting calendar so that you can get all of that timing right. So planning is very important. The next P in this is going to be purchasing. So I've got my plan. I know what I want to buy. So now I'm going to go to the garden center and I'm going to start looking at plants. Well, you want to be very selective. Select short, stocky stems. So those internodes, that's the space between where the leaves connect to the stem. You want short distances between those internodes. Look all over the plant, under the leaves, on the stem, and you want to make sure that they are free of disease or free of insects. Remember that those plants have been in a big truck with a lot of plants kind of crammed into that. And when you have an environment like that, sometimes it allows pests to really go haywire in those environments. So when you're purchasing them from your garden centers, just make sure that you're not buying a plant that already has a disease or insect on it. Look for plants that have dark green leaves that aren't starting to fade out a little bit yellow or anything like that. That just shows that it's been growing in a favorable habitat. And look for white roots. And you can kind of see that on both of these images that I have here. You can see the white roots. If they're starting to turn yellow or brown, then that's a good indication that they have not been watered adequately. And you can also see that those roots are not like winding around each other. So they're not outgrowing their container. So you might want to just kind of pop the roots just a little bit to see, or pop the plant out just to kind of see if those plants are root bound or not. If they are root bound, it's going to be a little bit harder for them to get established in your garden. So you want to look at that timing. Also, I know it's really, when you go to your garden center and you see all of those colors, you're like, oh, I want to get that color right away. But try to avoid plants that have flowers or fruits on them. If at that point, they're putting all of their energy into flowering or fruiting. And with your transplants, we want all of that energy to go into establishment. So they want to get the roots going and all of that. So try to avoid these plants with the flowers and the fruits already on them. So we have planting, we have purchasing, and then we have planting. So when you're planting the transplants, you want to be as gentle as you can. Prepare your site, and you can see this came from a West Virginia site here, where you can see they've already got the mulch spread. They're going to kind of pull that mulch away, and then they're going to use gravity and then just a little pinching at the bottom of the container to kind of pull that plant out, and you're holding it very gently by the stem. So you're preparing the site. Water your plants, have them well watered before you put them in the ground. Dig your hole about twice the width of the root ball and about the same depth. Now, the only exception is for tomatoes. Tomatoes are great at developing adventitious roots, which means they'll start to develop roots along that stem. So if you dig that or plant them deeper, like pull off some of the lower leaves and plant them deeper, then they'll actually develop a much larger root system, which is going to help feed the plant later on. So gently remove the plant from the container, place it in the hole, and then cover the roots and then with the soil, and then water it well around that. Try to avoid putting water directly on the leaves. And you'll also want to kind of pull some of the mulch up. If you listen to Justin's presentation last week, he was talking about how soil holds a lot of spores for fungi. So if you get the mulch and kind of cover that soil and then water, it keeps the spores from splashing up on your plant. So it just kind of helps with that pest management just a little bit. And then you're going to want to continue to keep your soil moist, but not soggy, for about 3 to 4 days after you plant them, just to kind of help reduce some of the transplant shock that you might see. And really, that's a kind of a quick and dirty guide for using transplants in the garden. So if you have any questions, pop them in the chat or email me. We'll be happy to help. Thanks.
Thank you, Gwen. And now Debbie is going to ask her, what is it question?
Yeah, first of all, I would just want to apologize to everyone, simply because when I'm posting into the chat box everybody's resources, I unfortunately am getting all this gobbledygook in there as well. So I'm not sure exactly what is the cause of that. So let me get myself settled here. So I just want to let everyone know that Katie, Patrick, and I were very fortunate. We attended a professional development training with our national association, professional association, and we visited the Netherlands, and it was a phenomenal trip with lots and lots of great information. So over the next coming weeks, we'll be chatting about some of the different things that we saw. So for my what is it today, I have, what is the plant hardiness zone in the Netherlands? Is it zone 5A to 6B, zone 6A to 7B, zone 6B to 8A, or zone 7A to 10A? So if you want to go ahead, and Jarrett's got the little poll up, if you guys want to make a selection on what you think it might be. Glad to see people are coming in with some answers, so thank you for that. Anybody else want to take another guess? I'm gonna end the poll now. Okay, so I'm going to share the results of the poll. Most of you thought, at least 42%, that it was zone 5A to 6B, 26% 6A to 7B, 26% said 6B to 8A, and only 5%, one of 19 people that filled out the survey, said zone 7A to 10. And that means, in my opinion, that the one person who filled out that answer is correct. We were all very, very surprised at the plant hardiness zone. Remember, this is the temperature where it goes down to for the coldest of temperatures. And it was really, really interesting to see that. We kept hearing that over again. If you'll notice, up in the very, very northern part, this whole colored area is the Netherlands, but just this one little section, which is the furthest north, is the one that's going to be in zone 10A and 9B. But the vast majority of the horticulture growing area is going to be in the orange area and the brown area. So the zones of 8B, 9A, and 9B, those were just really interesting. And it was interesting just in general to see that they're much further northern country than what we are, but they get all of the, being on the North Sea, they get a lot of different types of temperature over there. And we just thought it was really fascinating. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Debbie. And now Debbie and Katie are going to talk about tulips.
Yeah, let me get this up, and then Katie's going to get us started.
So, for us in Missouri, we are late for tulips, but in the Netherlands, of course, this last week, they were in full bloom. So on our tour bus, a lot of times we did get to observe fields like this with tulips in full bloom and masses of color. And also, as the Netherlands is known for, windmills. So here is a modern windmill. We also saw the historic windmills. They were both mixed together with that. And a lot of the windmills are actually used to pump water because of the water table.
And then on this slide, one of my favorite stops was Keukenhof. It was a garden area, 650 acres. And this is a picture that I took while we were walking through that garden. This garden is kind of like a home to tulips. It's only open 2 months out of the year. This entire garden is just 2 months, and it's showcasing tulips, and it's just fascinating walking through this garden. I know I took about, I don't know, 250 different pictures within just this one garden. It was simply fascinating.
So the history of tulips also make them interesting because they have a long history. They actually originated in Kazakhstan and were brought to the Netherlands in 1593 via the spice route. And they were to honor the king and queen, and they were kept at Hortus Botanicus due to being a unique flower. The soil and temperature there in the Netherlands were perfect for growing tulips and the production of tulips. So once you got a cool plant, you've got to figure out how you can breed it and make it different and even more valuable. So that breeding began over 1,000 varieties by 1630. So not even quite 40 years later, they had over 1,000 different varieties from that original. And 500 of those are uniquely Dutch from the Netherlands. A small number of mother bulbs were available per variety, so that's where the rarity of different kinds of tulips comes in.
And they were very rare in the very beginning when they first came to the Netherlands. Really only those folks that had money were able to actually purchase the tulips bulbs simply because it was fashionable, it was a unique flower. It was a seasonal trade and it was only for about 4 months per year. Due to the scarcity of the total number of tulips and the kinds of tulips that were available, a craze actually began, and it's actually called tulip mania. And if you look at the Dutch history, it's listed in their history an era of tulip mania. So each year, the bulbs for the tulips began rising in prices. And what was also really interesting is that one tulip, and it's the picture that's right there, actually became where it cost 5,000 florins. Florins was their monetary exchange, 5,000 for one bulb, just one. And the average salary at that time was $1,500 of florins. I call it dollars florins. So that was really interesting to see that. And this particular tulip is called Semper Augustus. And it actually is still in existence at the Keukenhof Gardens, which was really interesting. And then the Dutch always like to say that the first stock market crash happened in 1637 when the tulip prices kept going up, and then all of a sudden the market for tulips crashed. And essentially, there were quite a few individuals that were trading in tulips at the time who actually did go bankrupt.
So tulips have been cultivated for over 400 years, and there is actually a maintained collection at Hortus Bulbarium. And the Hortus collection maintains over 3,500 varieties, including more than 2,500 tulips themselves. The oldest cultivated tulip, the Duc van Tol red and yellow, dates back to 1595, and it was showcased at Keukenhof. We mixed it blooming, so the picture on the left is one that Debbie took of the sign. Some of the blooms were passed, but a lot of beautiful tulips that we got to enjoy regardless.
And I'll be honest, this picture on the right, I was able to find out on the internet, and that's actually what the tulip red and yellow looks like still in existence for today, back from that 1595. So tulip breeding, and this is what I thought was really fascinating. So new varieties are created by interbreeding with the different varieties. So the cross-pollination, of course, you put the male pollen onto one tulip to the female pistil of another tulip, not the same one, but separate ones. And so each tulip flower should produce about 200 seeds. And this was really interesting. It takes 5 years from when you plant the seed for the actual plant to develop the flower buds when it will actually produce its first flower. So if you want to grow tulips from seeds, you can. However, it'll take 5 years before you'll actually get a flower. And then once it actually does become present, the flower, they can assess it for its appearance. Does it have the traits and the characteristics that they want to make it a new type of a variety? And so after they continue to breed, they look for those traits continuously, and it takes about 25 years from starting the breeding of the tulips, from taking the seeds. It takes about 25 years before a variety is actually available for commercial sale. And I just thought that was totally fascinating.
So tulip names, new varieties, as Debbie just mentioned, can take up to 25 years, but each new variety gets its own specific name, And tulips originally were named after famous personalities or breeders as early as the 16th century, such as Emperor Augustus was named after the Roman emperor. So you honored those that were in power. Tulips can also be christened. The new varieties are shown at Kuchenhof and are named Queen Beatrix or even Mickey Mouse. We really enjoyed walking around and reading different tulip names. So you can see some at the bottom: Charming Lady, Graceland, Constantinople, Veronique, Sansom. So lots of interesting names to go with lots of interesting looking tulips.
And so the modern tulips of today are really interesting because they've gotten, after 400 years of breeding, they have developed 15 different tulip groups, and thoughts of varieties have been created. So the tulip groups are listed below. So if tulips are one of your things that you enjoy planting each year, and you look in the catalog, you'll see the tulips are grouped into these different types of categories. So they breed them to be an early variety, or a double variety, or later in the season, or parrots, or lily flowers. It's really, really interesting to see the different types of tulip groups that are actually out there.
So here you can see just a small sampling of all the tulips we were able to experience at mostly at the Kuchenhof, but various gardens, other gardens that we visited. It's we kept telling each other, do we have enough pictures of tulips yet? Nope. Everyone was unique and beautiful. Several of these, you can see the double ones actually kind of remind me of peonies. So you get lots and lots of variety, shapes, colors, fringes, opens. So tulips just have a vast amount of variety in them.
And then also you'll notice that in this top picture on the left, they breed them also for different heights. So some of the different garden sections that were in there, you could see the different colors at different heights, and it was just amazing. And then this tulip is completely open. This is how this one opens, and it's so unique. And we've got a couple more pages here, slides. So the parrot kinds, the way they open, the different fringes on the edges here. You know, this one looks like, you know, having that green with that pink, and then those are totally open. It was just amazing to see. It's like every time we turned around, like, oh, I like that one. Oh, I like that one. Oh, I want that one. And it was just so interesting to see all these varieties and colors. And it was, I don't know how to say it, it was just totally amazing.
And yet again, some more different colors, shapes, and fringes and varieties.
Yeah, my sister didn't believe me when I told her this one here was a tulip. She goes, it looks like a lily. I was like, no. What's interesting about this one is it's got the same shape, but the coloration is totally different. So I thought that was cool.
So here this was, I don't believe, part of the Kuchenhof, but we could observe it from the Kuchenhof. So these were production fields of tulips, and you see that piece of equipment in the center. And actually what that was doing was cutting off all the blooms. And the reason for that is when you are looking at bulb production, you do not want that flower to make seed, because then the plant puts all of its energy into making seed. So they run equipment over the fields and actually cut the flower blooms off. So that plant concentrates on producing that bulb to size it up for sale.
And that's just a little bit of one day, of a piece of one day for our trip there to Holland. So, and Holland is a section of the entire Netherlands. So
and I
thanks for-
highly recommend visiting the Netherlands if you ever get a chance. As a horticulture lover, it is the country that has so much horticulture.
It is just totally amazing over there. I agree, especially if you like tulips. And that Kukenoff garden that we're at, they averaged 25,000 people a day. It was just amazing. Thank you, Jennifer.
Wow. Thank you, ladies. That looked very interesting. Hopefully we'll learn some more about it at another time. So yeah, wow. Okay, let's move on. And we're going to let Pong go next. And he's going to do I See a Sick Plant.
Thank you, Jennifer. This is Peng from Plant Diagnostic Clinic. I would like to thank Debbie and Kitty to show so many great photos, but I didn't see any photos of plant disease. I thought sometimes plant disease can also be very beautiful. Let's check out this one. Look at these leaves of this peach tree. Don't they look beautiful to you guys? As beautiful as the tulip? You can see on the symptoms, the leaves are curling. They're little kind of like a bump, like a pinkish bump here and there. And the whole leaves is kind of like a twisting. And this is from one of my clients. So now it's your turn. You know, when we see the sick plants, we need to know what causes this problem. So here, I would like to show you those options. I will let Jared to pull out our poll and give you maybe 15 seconds or 20 seconds to name the cause. What could be the cause? Thank you, Jared. Looks great. The poll started. Yeah, definitely. I saw the poll, it's changing. It could be like insect galls, it could be herbicide, it could be fungus. Oh, hormonal disorder like physiological. Sunburn, maybe. I give you 5 more seconds. Okay. Many people still didn't vote yet. Okay. All right. Let me end the poll. I'm sorry to give you such a little time. So let me show you the result. So, oh, that's 1/3 of people select the fungus, 1/3 of people select the insect galls, and all the other people select the physiological disorder, herbicide damage. It's pretty even. So let me review the answer. So this is actually caused by a fungus. This disease is called a peach leaf curl disease caused by Tephorina deformans. I'm not a good Latin, good at Latin, but this word, the species level, kind of like resemble the deformed. So that's how the name comes from, Tephorina deformans. So this is a fungal pathogen that can cause leaf curling, twisting, a little bit pinkish color on the leaf. And here are some facts of this disease. This, like I mentioned about the symptoms are shown here, they favors rainy, cool spring days like now. And they can cause the leaf become thickened. And once they start, they will turn to be pinkish color, then leads to pale yellow, grayish, white, and then they will produce a lot of spore that can be spread by wind and rain splash to the other leaves. They can survive on the bud or the twigs, and they reinfect the plant next year. Overall, it can cause, most of symptoms can be shown on the leaf, but they can also cause reduced fruit set and premature falling of the fruits. This morning during the meeting, Katie actually showed us a sample of a plum tree. So Tephorina species has really wide host range, can infect and cause a leaf curling on peach, plum, a cherry, apricots, and many stone fruits. So the symptoms are very, very characteristic. If you see this type of symptom next time, that's a leaf curl disease caused by Tephorina. To manage this, you need to get rid of the plants as soon as possible. In the end of season, there are resistant and tolerant varieties out there that can for you to select. fungicide application has been proved to be very effective. So one time the fungicide application later in the winter can keep the disease free. So did you get the right answer? Thank you so much for participation. I see you next week in the IC Sick Plants. Bye.
Thank you, Pong.
Jennifer, we had one question come in for Debbie and Katie. After they cut off the tulip flowers in the fields, what do they do after that with them? When do they dig them, and how do they dig them?
So, unfortunately, we did not get to tour an actual bulb producer. So, what we got on production actually came from our tour guide at the Kuchenhof Garden. So, she was talking about them cutting them off. But I assume they grow a while longer before the bulbs are processed. I think they have to be a certain size. But that's kind of all I know, unless Debbie remembered something else or if she researched more.
I didn't recall anyone talking about that in particular. But what I was looking at yesterday when I was putting the slide set together is that, you know, a bulb will have little bulbets, and they need those little bulbs to continue to grow. And so they want them to get bigger, such as Katie said, to get to a certain size. And of course, what you do is you cut the flower head off, like she said, so they put their energy into developing those bulbs.
All right. Anything else?
That's all I have right now.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question or answer one that has come in. Actually, it came in a few days ago. All right, so we have an anthill in a master gardener beautification site in a public park. What should we do? And here on the right, you can see the anthill. That is actually in a public park in Kirksville. It is a beautification site that our Kirksville Master Gardeners maintain. And it's actually been there for years. I have seen this, and it's been there for many years, actually. And so this year they've thought about, well, what should we do? Well, you can either do nothing and leave it alone. So if you see that and it's already been there for years and it's doing no harm, just leave it, let it be. Or if you want to get rid of it, you can use an insecticide that is labeled for ant control. And the garden centers have, ant control that you can purchase. You can also try borax. Some people may know that borax does kill ants. And also we found from UC Davis that cornmeal may work. So there you go. Leave it alone, use insecticide, or try cornmeal or borax. And with that, we are going to wrap this up. All right, so we want to thank you for joining us today. Our next garden hour will be next Wednesday from noon to 1. It will be May 8th. And if you have questions that you would like to ask us, you can ask at that link below, the ipm.missouri.edu /townhalls/. So please ask your questions and we will answer them on the garden hour next week. If you would like to save the chat, you will see 3 dots at the top. You can click on those 3 dots and you can click on Save Chat. And again, just to remind everybody, we have horticulture specialists around the state. You can see where your county is located and see who is covering your county and reach out to them for more information or to have your questions answered. And with that, I would like to thank everybody that joined us today and have a good rest of the day. Thank you, everyone.